And we should be live, everyone. Hello. It is a great Friday evening, and we will be discussing a very depressing topic, but one that is necessary in our circles, the metaverse. And I am joined by the wonderful Prudentialist. How you doing?
I'm finally off work, so I really can't complain. I'm doing quite well.
Well, that's good to hear. It's a busy day for me as well. But we have an interesting topic to discuss today, the metaverse, which should send shivers down your spine if you actually have a brain cell, because the future the globalists want for you is very terrifying.
Well, I mean, this isn't necessarily the first iteration of some sort of existence and alternate reality. I think just the tech has come up to speed with, what people or what I guess I should say interests of those that of the powers that be would like to incur. But considering that there's always this push for lowering the standards of living, why not find an escape in some kind of digital foundry?
Yes, the escapism only gets more and more elaborate, but the escape doesn't change, is what I found so far, especially with these more technological advances, is they only just get more pretty, is a simple way to put it. But if you don't know, if you've been living under a rock, like some people who say that the metaverse isn't an important topic, not worthy of our time to discuss, the metaverse is Mr. Mark, the humanoid. It's fake universe, which they all want you to be in, where you can shop and consume mindlessly in Walmart, and as we see in the thumbnail. But not just consuming, no. Businesses, banking, and of course, religious services will be held, as that is a component of Mr. Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse concept for all of humankind. Very interesting indeed. But the potential power dynamics here are insane. Facebook already has 2 million users, 2 billion, sorry, 2 billion users. Yes, as you can see right now, this is a global humanoid product, as the globalist elites would call them.
Well, I'm not really surprised that this is happening in the slightest. I mean, you're putting yourself in a situation where there's digital shopping, there's a digital form of escapism. I mean, there's always been the aspect of an avatar as a way to enjoy life or at least to escape from it, which is why I find this development so interesting since we're talking about, say, like shopping or the Walmart metaverse. Is that okay? They're going to be emulating real life, despite the fact that that's kind of the one thing that a lot of people use to avoid, the real life, the realities of things. It's why many people pick an avatar, or when they try and customize a character in a game, it doesn't look like them, or when it does, it's without blemishes or features. But now we're sort of entering, the simulation, the simulation and simulacra of things. And now it's we're going to go shopping in the metaverse Walmart. We're going to have customer service in the metaverse Walmart. But I mean, the thing is, you mentioned earlier that this isn't the first time. Well, this isn't just shopping; that it's also part of day-to-day life. Apparently, there was a wedding held in the metaverse.
Yes, there was, unfortunately, this event did take place in the metaverse. Very unfortunate. But it is not the only thing that is taking place in the metaverse already, as a concert by Justin Bieber has taken place, and a Protestant church, a mega church, has fully moved over to the metaverse, generously provided by Mr. Mark Zuckerberg as an incentive. All moving over to the metaverse, and a bunch of brands, of course, Louis Vuitton, Gucci, have all brought fake virtual retail spaces in the metaverse, of course, for their global humanoid audience to consume mindlessly. And of course, they need to bring over the mindless drones, or as Mr. Mark Zuckerberg so miraculously calls them, dumb idiots who use his platforms, which they are. I mean, the man is a psychopath, I will say, and I don't even know if he's human, but that's still up for debate. But they are idiots for using Facebook. I mean, Facebook already is the most controlled. I mean, it's censored beyond belief. Your free speech is not a real thing on Facebook, obviously, and that's obvious to us, to anyone who has a brain cell. But you have these people who think the metaverse will somehow be even more, will be freedom of expression somehow, even though the same people who run these big tech platforms will run it. Who are just, I don't know to describe these people who think that this is a good idea to hand over this kind of data. And they already have so much data on you. They know your habits, what you buy, pretty much. Now you're going to hand them your mind, your face data, and basically your life to the Mr. Mark Zuckerberg. And that's not whose life you're also handing it towards. You're also handing it towards the big influence on the metaverse, of course, as they control most of the lithium supply and Silicon Valley production. So they have far reaching back doors. They already do into Facebook, of course, but the metaverse will be even more tightly controlled than even Facebook is, if you could believe that, which is very hard to believe. I don't know. What do you think about this, Mr. Prudentialist?
Well, I would say that it's important for us to keep in mind that there's a lot of emphasis on reducing physical space, right? So the idea of not putting out as much carbon, the idea that you have to be mindful of your surroundings or to create an environment that may not be conducive to what you want to do or want to live. And I mean, it's sort of a myriad of contradictions, because I'm sure that this is not a particularly carbon neutral platform, right? But it is a good way to let people ignore or conveniently find themselves lost in this simulacra of reality, while the world right in front of them, of course, is anything but the same. Almost as if we're recreating Plato's allegory of the cave, because instead of the cave, of course, it is now just a headset one can put on.
Yeah, to put you into a fake world to think you're achieving something when you're not. In reality, you're just being a dopamine slave, thinking that you're accomplishing something when you're not. And as your your real life is getting worse and worse because you spend so much more time, which we already do on social media, but it will be even much worse with the metaverse, I think, which is very concerning.
Well, I mean, we've already had this sort of conversation happen before, mainly in the lens of entertainment or social media. You've had social media addiction. You've had, people who want to live their life solely in, say, an MMO, or even earlier, right? You had what was considered Second Life. I know you're probably a little too young to remember that, but the idea of creating a digital space for one to live and for one to not really have any cares or concerns, to pursue ambitions that you might not have the opportunity to in the real world. What I find interesting about this, though, is that so many are trying to capitalize on what's been a very long predicted market that would eventually take rise, which would be augmented reality or virtual reality. But of course, we're all seeing sort of the more dystopic implications of it. I think everyone has got a pretty right head on their shoulders if they're looking at it skeptically. I mean, you consider the fact that they want, to consume less, to have more of a digital presence rather than a physical one. So, don't be so mindful, live in a smaller home, don't engage in the way that people used to traditionally. And so, but it fits, I think, rather the consumer base as well, especially when you consider that anyone probably under the age of, probably I would say 30 at this point, really doesn't remember a world without the internet, at least in a way to communicate and see what they'd like to see, or look up things that are of their particular interests and niche communities that come with it. So, when you have an entire generation, or in really two now, I would say, that are raised completely on the evolution of the internet, I mean, we're just seeing the next logical conclusion of that technological leap. And for anyone who knows that it kind of comes with some consequences, everyone's looking at it with a very skeptical eye.
And they really should when it's coming from these people, especially in Silicon Valley, who somehow people think they still have your interest in mind, or at least not hostile to yours, which of course is not true. They only see you as cattle to be used and slaves, pretty much in their view of people, which is why they call you dumb fucks for using their platforms, because these platforms are socially engineered to the max. Facebook is engineered to release the most dopamine for you to use it and to keep you addicted, depressed, and mentally ill. I mean, many people have said this, but like I think insiders have leaked this as well, that the platform and the algorithms are all engineered in this way, and the metaverse will be on a level 10 times that, because now they have your brain data you can scan. You think that they won't be doing that? Of course they will. And it won't just be that. It never stops there, of course. These people never stop. Once you give them an inch, they take a mile. But for some reason, we refuse to learn this lesson because it's novel and it's neat, neat. Of course, this is a false illusion that we should not fall for, at least the ones who can see this coming on the horizon. Because I still remember a time before the iPhone when there was still social interaction with friends and meeting up, and playing around, having clubs and stuff. And that just seems to disappear. The early 2000s, I can still remember that time before that. And a lot of people, even younger than me, can't even remember a time before that. And that's very depressing, but so be it. It is very depressing, though, in a way. Kind of a black-pilling idea, though.
Well, I mean, I'm a bit older than you, and so I can definitely remember a time of being outside until lights out or something like that. But I mean, consider the last 2 years of what's taken place, and you find yourself in a rather interesting position. Because I mean, most people had no opportunity to go outside. Most people were either brought in by fear or brought in by concern for others, taking advantage of sympathy to allow themselves to obey, allow themselves to say yes to whatever came next. And so there are people still now that, despite things wearing off or governments releasing and easing on restrictions, that they still won't go outside. They still won't talk to a lot of people. And so what a better way than to offer a product that can give them that escape. It's almost as if this entire thing has sort of created a generation of agoraphobics. They don't want to go out.
It definitely has. A lot of people are socially awkward and have already as much difficulty making friends as Mr. Prude's most recent video so pointed out. And this will only make things 10 times worse, of course. We're always sold that technology is there to bring us together and make life more convenient. And of course, convenience has a heavy, heavy price that we have failed to see past the quick dopamine releases and the instant gratification of modification of life to make it more convenient and easy, and not having to put into any work or venture, take any risk in life, to have any sense of pride in your life or accomplishment in anything. And that is very, very concerning. But the metaverse is not something that will be free, of course. And you have these people out there who will say, oh, well, we can have our own digital renaissance in the metaverse. We can relive the 2016 election over and over again in the metaverse. And of course, that's not going to happen. They already censor you, normie cons on Twitter. Of course, you're not going to be allowed to do that. And already, as soon as the metaverse concept has been released, Vice released an article out there saying that Facebook's biggest problem with the metaverse is going to be that they're not going to be able to censor enough. Before the platform has even come out in mainstream, they're already talking about is it going to be censored enough by Facebook and Mr. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, which is telling you all you need to know, of course, to debunk this lie that some people will tell you who might be paid shills, of course. I'm not going to name names. But these people are probably hostile actors, of course, and are just misled into accepting this because it's neat or something. And we already have some proof of this. I'm going to share my screen to share an article already. Self-regulation just won't cut it in the metaverse. It needs a virtual interlope, of course, and this is give you a picture of the gay world that they imagine for you, and this will be the future that most normies will take, unfortunately. because they cannot seem to think past quick dopamine and instant gratification, unfortunately, for most people. But what do you think about that, Mr. Prudentialist?
Well, the fact that they want some kind of Interpol, an international policing aspect, it doesn't surprise me. But I mean, at the same time, right? This is normal. You've given a lot of attention to the ever so memeable Mark Zuckerberg, but I mean, you have to keep in mind that while he may be the public face of things, you still have an army of content managers, an algorithm to maintain, various computer scientists and programmers that make sure that that thing works and exists. Everything that you would need for it to function. I mean, that's what you would want. So I mean, as much as it's fun to drip layers of irony onto calling him out for what he has said in the past about people that use its product, it's very difficult, I think, to break for a lot of people their convenience from it. So, yeah, he's sort of the public face of things. He's showing it off. He's trying to sell it, which is kind of funny when you think about the fact he's the least human, relatable person out there. But this is, I think, just an evolution of social media. If you want to integrate behavior, how people actually look at one another, an actual full-bodied avatar, then yeah, this is somewhat of an inevitability.
There is inevitability of technology, honestly. It's all been building up to this point, of course, and it's just been sold to us as it's going to make our lives better and become an integral part of our lives, of course. And cell phones are now an integral part of your life. You can't go anywhere without a cell phone because you have to have it for your schedules, for work, or talking to your friends. How are you going to do that with a cell phone, of course? Libertarians will point out, well, just don't use the metaverse. You don't have to use it. Well, of course, that's not how these things work, of course. Once they have the mass population using it, they will force you to use it, of course. You have to use it for your job interview, meeting friends. You can't meet friends outside the metaverse. All your friends will be on it. You have to have your job interview on the metaverse. You'll have to own your own business on the metaverse because the real life economy will be mute. It will all be on there and you'll be forced to use it. And if you don't use it, they will probably punish you in some way eventually if it gets to that point. But social ostracism will probably serve them well in that point, I think, honestly. So this whole argument of, well, just don't use it or just build your own metaverse, of course, that's insane. But for some reason, we still have people trying to point this libertarian argument out as if it's valid for any reason at all. And they don't see this coming. Prison, I mean, that should tell you that they're using this on prisoners to make them simulate life sentences. That should tell you all you need to know about this metaverse. To think that it's a gift or a convenience on society or your life, it is not. And we have put people trying to say this lie or try to convince themselves that it isn't, because they will accept it. Most people will unfortunately accept this in their lives as they accepted the cell phone. They got into this. It was convenient, made life more easier. Of course, all technology ultimately can be used for an evil purpose, of course. And since we love talking about the big gay, and Mr. Prudentialist is a foreign policy expert, the big gay will, of course, be using this technology in an evil way. And of course, they don't view people in a human way. These elites, of course, are current elite. And so I would not trust them with this type of power for their own metaverse. I mean, why would you trust somebody to say their own universe? It's psychotic. But most people have cognitive dissonance, so they can't even accept that. I don't know. It's just crazy.
Well, keep in mind that the military has been using technology like this in simulation and full, sort of bodied avatar programs for what you could call alternate or augmented reality for years. I mean, the Marine Corps back in like 1994 already had wads out for Doom in order to train or have a simulation like program in order to train and prepare Marines for breaching or combat and responding to things. So, I mean, there's always a pipeline from military technology to what we see on the civilian market. And as we know, there's always a laundry list of ways in which, social control often has its own, military aspect to it. Keep in mind, for you, as you have a long history of it from Operation Mockingbird when it came to the press during the Cold War. Now, today, the National Defense Authorization Act, I think really as far back as since they started using NDAAs for appropriation bills. has allowed the military to engage in propaganda at home or working in consultation with Hollywood, a very top down distributed consensus of what should be said and what shouldn't be. So this technology will probably be a greater way for social engineering, I'm sure. But I mean, by the fact that we're having this conversation and you're advocating for skepticism or to not use it, it's very similar to the large push against cell phones or being rather anti-tech that came out in the early 2000s. The infamous, videos or pictures of people dressed up as cell phones, like destroying them and beating somebody up in the middle of the street. I mean, it'll be a little harder, of course, when people are in their homes or, that technology is integrated with previous attempts. I can remember about, maybe 8 years ago, the, push for Google Glass for augmented reality. I mean, surely at this point that would be an inevitable integration for, say, the company Meta and Google to work together.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well, but I don't know, something we need to think about with this whole metaverse idea is why would you want to hand more power to these people who obviously hate you and despise you and work with the big gay, as we will so call it, to destroy your nation? And they obviously help with that in many ways than one by silencing people like us and people with dissident opinions about the regime and what they're doing. And they aid them in that, and they also fund them as well. These companies donate billions of dollars to control these politicians and elites, of course, foreign interest lobbies, of course. And so why would you trust somebody with that kind of power? It's just psychotic to do that. But most people are cognitively dissident and don't understand this. And it's very unfortunate, the situation that we have in our society where people are even having this conversation of they want their life to be online, virtual, and to be fake and unreal, and just gay. As we like to say, the big gay makes things more gay, of course, in more ways than one. And this is no exception to that rule, of course, as we all know. But the metaverse is more than that. It's an economy, too. And so you have these big fashion companies. So how are they going to convince the masses to get onto this platform? Well, they do that by getting the elites, the celebrities, the people who influence mass culture to do it. That's how they'll do it. They'll get the Gucci's. They already have. Justin Bieber did a concert on the metaverse. Most recently, Facebook paid a mega church in Texas, I believe, to bring their services entirely onto the metaverse. So you have bringing on these institutions, which will convince the masses, of course. As we all know, the masses are very easy to manipulate. And so that's how they bring them on, the mass society, to the metaverse concept. Because if you're a rational person, you would realize that this is a trap, obviously, to control you and to use you to make your life more miserable. But most people don't see that. They just see, oh, well, it makes things more easier. I can go to and shop at Walmart to get a new TV or Xbox, and I can order DoorDash to my pod Beam, so I can consume even more, of course, which is the new state religion is consumption. I believe that to be true. It's very materialistic and nihilistic, which is what this is in-game, is to push onto people.
Well, I mean, the other thing to also keep in mind in this issue is that we talk about, why aren't people waking up, or why aren't people acknowledging that some of these things are innately harmful for them? And there's a few reasons why. I mean, one, technology is always sold as this aspect of progress, despite the fact that it might come with some issues. You can tie a very close relationship to, say, the cotton gin and the issues of the antebellum South. You can relate to our growing use of cell phones and technology to our behavioral aspects with social media. And this, of course, will be no different. But I mean, especially when you take a look at the last 2 years and how people have more or less obeyed en masse, it becomes rather simple that maybe Aristotle was just right when it was recorded into politics all those centuries and millennia ago, was just that some people are just natural born slaves meant for a certain kind of labor to serve others, and that their mind is willingly to accept it, and they are happy to accept instruction. And I think that plays a major role about it. And what a better way than to give the illusion of freedom, or the illusion of life, than to simply offer a simulated alternative. I mean, there was something I was reading just the other day where they were trying to use um, virtual reality on cows who were stuck inside due to the cold weather, but they gave them virtual reality to assume it was vast green and warm pastures, which they had said was hopes to increase production, milk production, which is outright terrifying in itself. But I mean, at the same time, if it can work for cattle, it'll probably work for people that have no problem just wanting to, follow the rules and not cause any trouble.
Yeah, and that should tell you everything you need to know how these people just view everything in this like economic, just like way of mass production. Oh yeah, the cow thing was very real, Antburger. Oh, it is very real. I forgot that YouTuber's name. He's pretty famous. He covered this story. I forgot his name. It's slipping my mind, but you could check that out. He covered this as well, the fake virtual world. But it's very funny how these people want to push this. Oh, it will make your life better, Most people's lives are miserable, of course. The middle class is dying, So get into the metaverse, You can have a life imaginary life that is good. And of course, these people obviously create the problem and the solution to everything. That's the lesson you need to learn about these people. And so they created this problem, of course, by destroying social stability in life, friend groups, society. In a very real way, technology can be argued that it did that. I mean, technology obviously has positive applications, of course, in medical ways, but too much of it is a problem. And of course, we've reached to the point where technology has gone to diminishing returns, I believe, to where at this point it is just harmful and just gay in a way. It's just like it's these fake watches, Apple watches, your refrigerator, you can play Angry Birds on it or something. And that's what technology gets you. It gets you this fake production of life. But it makes you convinced that life is getting better because you have this new shiny thing, new shiny syndrome, to distract you from how your real life is getting worse and worse. And of course, to prevent you from questioning or thinking, why is that happening? Oh, and of course, the people who would try to point that out, of course, are silenced, of course, and targeted. And you won't hear their opinion in the metaverse, of course. That will be hate speech. And you already can't hear our opinion on these main social platforms already. And of course, these same people made your life worse in the first place. They destroyed the middle class. They destroyed nations, honestly, or are in the process of doing that. These globalists and, of course, the technical oligarchs are working alongside with them. They're minions in this. It's, of course, create the problem, destroy what was good in society, destroy society. And so you have to sedate the masses, is the thing they've realized. Since they made people's lives so miserable and depressing, suicide rates are climbing, unbelievable. Depression, people are much more unhappy. Society, social cohesion is being destroyed. People aren't making real life friend groups. This is all things that they have destroyed. And so they need to sedate this problem in order to prevent it from becoming a problem in the future. Is why I think they're pushing this so heavily now. And all these big companies are investing in the metaverse. You most recently had Microsoft recently just bought Activision Blizzard, and they recently said that Call of Duty's future will be on the metaverse. And that is, of course, to sedate more young men who are already spending way too much time on video games and in the fake virtual world to hide the fact that their lives are very depressing and miserable, and for them not to think about why that is or who may have caused their lives to get into this state in the first place. But most people don't have the cognitive awareness to think about these things like we do, like the autist on the internet, as I will call myself. But what do you think about that, Mr. Prudentialist?
Well, I mean, consider the fact that throughout at least the last 20 years, right, that you've seen a variety of companies try and jump in on different platforms or partner with different companies in order to try an advertising approach or to get people to be interested in their product. I remember quite a few years back in college, there was a big fuss over Hulu working with, I believe it was Chipotle of all places. They did this like mini series called Chopped and Serve, if I remember correctly, and it was basically just sort of selling the farming principles that Chipotle tries to go with, like all natural ingredients. They try to make it all fair trade and such. Um, and so this doesn't surprise me that other companies are looking towards the future, but I mean, at the same time, with how we approach things like video games, or say that the future of it is on the metaverse, I mean, it will be a platform, and we will see probably some aspect of competition take place. If it's going to be virtual reality, I'm sure that Valve will want to have a foothold in that, considering that they kind of provided us a rather effective proof of concept with Half-Life Alyx as to how the system could really work. While at the same time, the idea of further integrating your senses or your body or how to react to it for a more visceral, real experience is going to be something that people want. I mean, not everyone enjoys the fact that it's behind a computer. I mean, there are some people out there that really enjoy meal sims like the ARMA community. What a better way to integrate that than by your body, your mind engaging and consuming this? And it kind of fits rather well, especially when you start talking about things like CBDCs or any sort of kind of digital currency that is controlled or ran by the state, in ways that I think even Paul Krugman of the New York Times, economist extraordinaire for bad takes, but he had wrote that this was a really great way to keep the economy pumping, because the government can definitely mess with its value via having a digital coin to encourage consumer spending and less saving. So you're constantly going to have to spend in order to appreciate the value that you have in front of it. So what a better way than to get your non-fungible tokens or your cosmetics in a game or the metaverse for your appearance and outlook than by partnering with that. But I mean, every industry has at some point in time tried to engage in multimedia technology, even if their industry doesn't really apply to it, because they see it as the next big thing, the next avenue to engage in for a market share. And but of course, things have all sort of concentrated in power. Things have always so gotten more and more condensed. We all know who some of the biggest players are in the world, and techno capital is one of the biggest areas of power in the world. So why not just jump on the bandwagon and see what works for you, 6 months from now or 6 years?
True, I will say that is very true. Low carbon meta hats for your avatar. Of course, they will sell it to you as if it will be, but I think that they will actually subsidize these virtual reality headsets. Facebook obviously acquired Oculus back in 2014, and they already have a very high share in the virtual reality headset market. I believe it's like 63% or something like that. It's very high, but of course, that will only continue to grow. And I think that they will just basically ship these things out and give it to you for free. It's a gift. Take it. Of course, it will be a Faustian deal, of course, to take this, but most people will take it, I believe, because their lives will be very miserable and very lonely. And yeah, it's very depressing for most people's lives. We don't realize this, that most people's lives are very atomized. C.S. Lewis talked about the atomization of man. And we see that on a massive scale, especially in my generation. Most people don't have any friends. A good chunk of people like my age just are on Discord and Twitter all the time. They don't engage in society, and they don't try to improve their lives, which is why this is so harmful, is it gives you this false perception as if you're achieving something, and social media already does that to such a large scale that the metaverse will be even worse for that. And ruining your mind, of course, mass mental illness is already really bad in my generation. I mean, you could see that. It's on TikTok, Twitter, YouTube. I mean, go anywhere you want, you could see it. And Facebook's algorithms are engineered to do that. And this will only make things worse, of course, this fake world where they can have data to your mind. And people think that that's a good idea to give that to these megalomaniacs and psychopaths, to give them data to your brain, which is, of course, the ultimate goal, I believe, for this project.
Well, I mean, it's rather easy to use existing data to monitor habits, what you're interested in, what type of people that you're liking, or what kind of people you're attracted to, while at the same time also, body language, I think, will definitely play a role in that. You can be able to monitor human behavior more closely. But I mean, at the same time, right, this technology has always been used as an aspect to mask societal decay, at least in my opinion. Um, Anytime that a new technology is brought in, it is oftentimes to correct a problem that the previous technology did. And this isn't to say that I'm a Luddite. I'm not really your big Ted Kaczynski fan, although I do think that he offers a really unique way to look into the psychology of industrial societies. Um, but I do think, though, what we are seeing is not only just the market interest that might be involved, because yes, this is a really great way to get money and power, but at the same time, you're also witnessing the capacity to have that sort of control from a market perspective. I mean, if I can control or understand how a consumer acts, I can cater to their every need almost instantly based upon their behavior. So I know that they're not going away. Or better yet, if they're my employees and they operate in this sector, I can control the settings and environment to ensure that they don't really want to leave their job, or that there's no real reason for them to leave their job. I mean, even in present day, there's already been news reports and documented evidence from whistleblowers that companies like Amazon utilize and track like the demographics of their stores in order to keep them from unionizing or organizing against current working conditions. The more diverse they are, the more likely they are to not engage in this. And this goes back to various studies that show that there's less democratic participation when things are more diverse. And I mean, that can easily translate into the political as well. If there is a way to silence sort of the dissenting voices or opinions, ideological diversity, then you can achieve control that way. In the same way that, you know, if everyone is excited for the next product and is happy to jump on, or there's reason to get hyped over something, why not incorporate it or include it, right? Like, I mean, even in, like, I'm not, good God, I'm 26 and I'm trying to relate to an example about Fortnite. But I mean, even there, right? They had like the Martin Luther King Jr. Day event in Fortnite where they tried to put everything out on this like digital replica of the Lincoln Memorial and the reflection pool in Washington, D.C. They've done events to hype up other products. And why is that? Well, it's simple. I mean, products like this are probably not for you and me. Those products are probably for people younger than you and I. Because for an ideology to replicate that cannot do it biologically, you must do it through technological, synthetic, or through recruiting and grooming means, which is, I think, what we're seeing here. Well, what we call woke capital has this really great penchant for not targeting who's got the money. It's to target the youth, to indoctrinate the next generation. That way, when they have the capability of disposable income, like a Pavlovian response, they'll purchase product upon virtue signal.
Yes, these mass virtual companies. Of course, we saw Eminem recently got woke. Of course, I hate even using that term woke, but it fits so perfectly to make Eminem more gay. Now, of course, Eminem has to be gay. Pizza has to be gay. They all have to virtue signal into the new progressive materialist religion, which is, of course, the religion of America. It is not Christianity. Those times are long gone. And people think that it's actually atheism. Atheism is the religion of the progressive left. No. The religion of the progressive left is emotionalism, is consumerism. That is the religion of the progressive left, and the religion that has taken over the West, broadly speaking. If you wanted to name it, of course, that would be the fundamental tenets of the new religion that is taken over and is being forced upon society. Of course, they will say that they're atheists, and we need to breathing in these rational scientific reasons which prove, say we came from nothing or whatever, life is meaningless. You mindless blob of nothing. Consume your McDonald's burger and go home, which is what the message is ultimately told to people, of course. We recognize that is obviously a lie told to people who are ignorant of these things and these fundamental truths and transcendental values and truth, which most people don't know, or which is hidden from them, of course, most of the time because they have such control and monopoly over the levers of power, and all the institutions will, of course, regurgitate the progressive religion of materialism, emotionalism, consumerism, which are the three fundamental tenets of the new, the big gays religion branch, I will call it. You can call it whatever you want. but it is fundamentally have the same goal in its mind, of course, which is your destruction, of course, which they sadistically love your destruction. Of course, they talk about our youth having the highest child suicide rates. And these people seem to statistically like that. Of course, I think they do, and of course, we do. We know that these people like it. They love the destruction of societies for their own gain and to please the idol of their religion, of course, which is why they're doing it. Which is why they have this religious zeal to destroy society and destroy what is good, true, and beautiful. Of course, that is the three things that they cannot stand to exist, which is part of it. The metaverse, all of it is ultimately for that aim, I believe, is to destroy what is good, beautiful, and true. And they replace that with lies. You can name whatever. Ugly buildings. Architecture is ugly. It's hideous. It's depressing, overbearing, and censorship. Of course, the truth is suppressed. It is replaced with their truth, which is, of course, lies upon lies. Which I got into a tangent there, but it all fits into their narrative, I think. What do you think, Mr. Prudentialist?
Well, I think that it's also important to keep in mind that there are some teleological principles to this. I mean, we talk about this idea of liberation and the agency or the autonomy to do what they want. This isn't the this isn't me criticizing individualism, because individualism in itself is such this is a vast topic where you could probably argue, yeah, there's some aspects of it that have problems. But at the same time, however, you also have the issue of the age-old argument that of personal hedonism, right? That you're an individual, you can do what you want as long as you're not hurting anybody. And of course, that's always been sort of the slippery slope for a lot of things. It's two consenting adults. Why do you care what happens behind closed doors? It's because these things have long-term ramifications for how society operates. And I think that there's at least 70 some odd years of proof of that. But the other thing to keep in mind is that, yeah, there's a religion to it. Yes, there's definitely a factor to how it operates. And a lot of it, of course, I think is a very bastardized form of Christianity. You take the dominant religion, you wear the skin of it like it's your own. What kind of Spengler calls the second religiousness, either a return to it, or some kind of Caesarianism, which comes following after. And now I think Spengler writes about the sort of second religiousness is that right before things fall apart and where Caesar comes along, it's usually meant to be done in the former fashion of the founding religion of that civilization or of that society, which, I mean, for the West, from basically, the defeat of the Umayyad Caliphate in 732, and of course the Eastern Byzantines holding off Islam, the West is predominantly, Christendom. And so why not wear its skin like a suit? This is what comes next. And I mean, we've seen this throughout everything. It's about liberation. It's about equality. It's about the revolution against a systemic society that is inherently or innately evil of the old. And we must tear down the icons of the past because we have our devils and they've been assigned to us. And when all that is put in mind, the consumerist aspect of it is almost sacramental. When Derek Chauvin was convicted because George Floyd overdosed, it was basically there were revivals in the streets. There were impromptu baptisms at the site where George Floyd died, as if it was some sort of religious significance and some religious ceremony. And to them, it is. This is why people have BLM, tattooed on their skin. This is why they have it on their profiles. This is why they have it on there. It's almost akin to wearing the cross on your chest with a necklace.
Excellent observation there, I will say. I think some things we need to remember, though, is this goal that they have in mind will ultimately fail. We do need to stay white-pilled, of course. Things are very black-pilling in our time. We live in a declining and dying civilization. We see our symbols of our culture being destroyed and symbols of the new gay erected in their place, their icons being replaced, our holidays being changed, holidays as you coin them, being set up as the new holidays. January 6th, the Great Insurrection, is being named one of them, of course, is the new holy day of the progressive religion of the state. And their goals of domination are going to fail, of course. Aaron McIntyre had a great video recently. I highly recommend you watch it. The Why the Managerial Elites Will Fail. And in that video, sorry about my dog, you can hear that in the background, but that video is very white pilling. Aaron explains how these managerial elites accumulate all this power, but they ultimately collapse on themselves. But that he does say that you shouldn't rest on this notion that they do collapse in the end. They can still wreck your civilization in the meantime while they hold the levers of power, of course. But the ultimate thing we need to remember about all these destructive forces on the horizon that we can see, they all come in one way or another, and they all ultimately progress until the virtual gay pod eating the bugs. We could see this future being prepared for us, of course, with the Great Reset, and with them recently installing kill switches on your cars, of course, which we use for your carbon credit scores. We see these, you need to live in the pod, having children is immoral. They said that for a long time. Now they're saying that for third world countries, how it is immoral for you to have kids, for the climate, of course. Of course, these people never live there what they preach, of course. That's for the peasants that they have power over, as we all know. These people will, of course, eat the meat. They will not be eating the roaches. You will be eating the roach bars, of course. You will be living in the pod, in your virtual reality headset, living your fake life as they reach the rewards of your destruction of your society and what they can scavenge off the carcass of Western civilization and the US empire. What they can get every last bit, of course, as is dying and decaying, as we can see in front of our very eyes, is decaying. But the ultimate thing to remember is that good does win in the end, you know. This is the Christ pill, of course, I like to bring into my videos. You know, we do win in the end, of course, boys. These people are gay and they're not going to win. They're very weak people. They do have tremendous power as they control these institutions and Facebook and all these social media platforms. But ultimately, once you strip that from them, they're just very weak and scared people, ultimately. And so that is very white pilling, I think, is what we need to remember with all these topics. Of course, we see these things being pushed upon our society, and we recognize the situation and the despair of our age. That we shouldn't despair, of course. We should not be doing that. We should have hope for the future. And we need to have hope because pessimistic people never achieve anything. And so that's why the black pill is not going to be our solution to achieve anything, ultimately. That's what they want. They want you to be black pill. They ultimately want us to have no hope. And they ultimately want you to delete yourself. Self-deletion. I'm not going to say the word on YouTube, but you know what I mean. They want you to self-delete, of course. That's their ultimate goal with this stuff, is to make you self-delete with their total isolation and despair in society. This is what I see them doing. But what do you think about that, Mr. Prudentialist?
While I think that it is important, and I've reiterated this several times in various videos of mine, that you don't want to engage in the nihilism that people want you to be there. They don't want, I mean, they would like you to be completely atomized. They would like you to buy into the system and submit. And of course, that is not the option that most people in these spheres want. However, this doesn't mean that you can sit back and watch things collapse. I don't think you should either advocate for it either. I'm not one to advocate for immanentizing the eschaton, but when it comes to this, and we talk about this or the next dystopian topic of the week, the next flavor of what we would consider to be evil or demonic, what have you, this is why I think it is so important, and this is why I focused this on sort of the last video I made, and why people like the Distributists have talked about it, Frody from Guide to Cultures talked about it, Turnips talked about it, hell, I talked about it like 6 months ago when we talked about mentorship and horror. That the idea of bringing people out of Plato's allegory of the cave, so to speak, bringing people out of Mark Zuckerberg's allegory of the metaverse, it will be important. You can't sit back and simply watch things fall apart. As much as that might be enjoyable if you have a bit of, Schadenfreude. I mean, who doesn't? But you can't just sit by and not do anything. Because apathy towards incrementalism, the idea that we can just sit back and let things slowly creep to us, inevitably leads towards absolutism. So it's always nice to have our faith. It's always nice to engage in congregation, but unless you're actually doing something about it and not just online, then you're not going to get very far.
That is true. We need to be men of the ruins, of course, but that doesn't mean we just sit on our ass and don't do anything. We must do something, save or make friend groups, know your neighbors, of course, is always great advice. If you want to get involved in local politics, those are very things that you can do that have an impact on your local community. And of course, these are things that we all should be doing. You know, just talking to people, talking to your neighbors. Most people don't even know who their neighbors are. They don't have any friends. They should try to get out of the shell that the society has been imposing upon them, which is self-isolationism. But I want to start getting into some of the comments that you have, and Mr. Prude and I will answer them, talk about them. If that sounds good with you, Prudentialist?
Works for me.
All right, let's get into some of the comments. Hang on, how do you show these things? There we go. Amberger says they don't let their own children use these platforms, and that tells you all you need to know. It's bad for you. Of course they don't. Why would they let their own children use this trap, which is for the masses and for their own gain? Of course, they won't use it upon themselves. Of course, the powerful don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, anytime that someone's trying to sell you something and they don't use it themselves, kind of all you need to know.
Very true, very true. Amberger again says that's the elite trying to hack into your brain, invest in thicker foil. Well, I don't really think that's going to help you if you're going to put on their Metaverse helmet, but it's going to help. Prudentialist, you think some tinfoil is going to help?
And Burger is sitting behind the flipped over table with the tin foil, and they're all gonna burst in, just being like, "We have you surrounded. Put on the head goggles." And he's just gonna wrap more tin foil around him, saying he hates Mark Zuckerberg over and over, like the "I hate the Antichrist" meme.
Which is very based, I will say, but maybe the Zamperger will survive this in the end. We shall see, but I have a feeling that it's not going to be that easy, unfortunately. Amberger again says, it's not so cool, people won't use it. Same thing happened with Google Glasses. It looked gay and creepy. It so failed. Yeah, but the difference is that society is just very easy to control, is the word I'm going to use. And these people have tremendous amounts of power and wealth at their disposal. And they have all the institutions, the celebrities, the mass influencers, which is how they get people into these things, is they use the mass influencers to convince people, go into the herd, sheep, go into this pasture that we have total control over, of course.
Well, there was also like technical issues with Google Glass, right? But I do think that it'll come back, especially since we're seeing more emphasis on augmented reality or sunglasses and things like that. So, maybe it's one of those things that was just developed a little too early for the zeitgeist. Who knows?
Unfortunately, but the zeitgeist is always going to head in this direction. But it will collapse eventually, folks. It will eventually collapse. I believe that. Even our books have batteries now in our cigarettes, a simulation of reality. That is true. Technology has just reached a plateau of not being useful in any way, shape, or form. I mean, you could speak any highly on this or elaborate. It's not useful in any way. It's very harmful, actually, in most cases, to our society. And it's just fake. It doesn't serve any purpose. It's just to distract you, of course, which is what it's used for.
Well, I look at the comment, and there was this great line from a guy named Randy. He's on Substack. He used to be on Twitter under Egg Report or Egg Retort, one of the two. But he has got this line, I think, in one of his first pieces that really stuck with me, and he says, "In the mind of every reactionary, I can show you the heart of the broken heart of a futurist." Which I think kind of stands out because there's people that get really excited over what might come or what's considered to be progress or the next technological advancement, and then comes the heartbreaking reality that it isn't what you had assumed it to be or what it was sold to you to be. You know, we we get sold on what the sort of the cyberpunk dystopia or what the future would be of like Blade Runner and things like that. And you know, our books have batteries, our cigarettes look like USB sticks, and at the end of the day, it's the realization that things are awful, which I think causes people to react the way that they do and go into reaction as an idea.
I definitely think so. It does make people react to what they're doing and what these things are, but hopefully it's in a positive direction. Ultimately, can be used. Hopefully, I believe it can be. But Mr. Stonehat says Ready Player 2, the second awful installment into the metaverse propaganda posed as the solution to the trans question. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
I'm not familiar with it either, but now I'm going to go have to look this up after the stream.
I'm sure it has something to do with the Ready Player one, but maybe you could elaborate in the comments and what that, Mr. Stonehat. You can have whatever body you want and do Deegan with it. I think Black Mirror has a similar episode. Well, what episode of Black Mirror hasn't become to reality at this point because we're progressing so fast into the World Economic Forum's future for us that it seems unreal to us.
Well, I think Stonehat raises a really good point because it's not like the gamification of everything. Like this is where like RPGs have gotten really dumbed down. Like if you were to say look at the mechanics behind something like Fallout or Arcanum or even Daggerfall, right? It's nothing compared to what passes for an RPG these days, and it's more focused on player customization, especially on the aesthetics of it, what your avatar looks like, and the like. So, what makes these things so interesting, and I think I mentioned this kind of briefly at the beginning, was this idea that you can engage in an avatar or a platform that is perfect to what you want to be. You know, we kind of already see this with other forms of, you know, degen. Furries come to mind immediately. This is an escapism. It's a way to engage and customize and be whatever they want and do what they want. So yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised. I mean, if you can have whatever body you want, then why not engage and give incentive for people to engage in dangerous behavior like mutilation of the body to be something you're not. I don't watch Black Mirror, but I think I know the episode that you're referencing in question. I think Last Things did a really good episode cover or video covering that episode.
Definitely, I will say that. Mr. Amber, of course, wasn't there an episode where the army are like fighting some random people and the AR artificial reality makes them seem like demons? I don't know. They could use this against us. I think they might. Hopefully not, but knowing these people, they probably will.
It's a good way to, if you can dehumanize people, it makes it a lot easier to commit unwitting acts of violence. So yeah, why not?
And they already do that in their rhetoric all the time, and it shows because there's a bunch of crimes against white people. We recently saw that girl get stabbed in Los Angeles by a homeless guy, and that may not be convinced to that, but it shows you what they can do already with just rhetoric. Now imagine they have artificial reality with the army of zombies. What they can do with that should terrify you. Ready Player One did Metaverse will solve poverty, and you can live in a slum but still go to a leafy green school. Then RP2 did the sex stuff. Well, the sex stuff is something I should have mentioned, but that will, of course, be used. Prawn is already prawn addiction is a huge problem amongst men our age, and I can imagine this only making things worse.
Yeah, I'm not surprised in the slightest. I mean, that's the thing, right? We meme it into existence where it's, you know, homeless guys in California with a tent, but they're you know playing on an Oculus Rift or something. Then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And like I mentioned with the RPG thing, if you're so focused on customization and you can create a very realistic simulated reality, then yeah, I wouldn't be surprised that that's the next inevitable step.
So true, very true. Reject game modernity, RPGs embrace dwarf fortresses. I don't know about that. Mr. Pruitt's probably the RPG expert, so you have to see what he says about that.
I mean, Dwarf Fortress is pretty good. I don't have too many hours into it, but that's enjoyable. If you really, I'm more of a 4X person or like grand strategy games. So things like uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Things like, oh my god, I've lost my mind. Like Crusader Kings 2, of course, is grand strategy. I'm also thinking of Sins of a Solar Empire, the OG Homeworld games. That's more my thing. But if I want a good RPG, then there are some really good Fallout 2 mods to enjoy. There's also Daggerfall, as I mentioned earlier. But yeah, I mean, Dwarf Fortress isn't all that bad.
I'm not really an RPG guy, but I am a first-person shooter and a story kind of guy, so I couldn't really tell you. But Mr. Pruitt's position is probably correct. He's pretty high IQ, I would say. I had this debate recently at work. If you put your kids on a helmet and they're instantly on a golden beach, what incentive do they have to clean up their own local beachfront? Well, I think that also plays into their narrative to get rid of community formant and helping your community in any way, shape, or form, or replacing it with a virtual world. Of course, I think that plays into their ultimate aims here with this, which is why they push it so much. I'm not sure how that would fit, though.
Well, if you provide a nice leafy green escape, there's no reason to take it off. There's no reason to smell the ashes, smell the coffee beans, wake up and take a look around you. So yeah, I mean, no, I mean that Stonehat's got a great point. If I put my kids on the helmet and they are instantly provided with almost every single thing that they could ever imagine and ever want, where they're not told no, then why on earth would they ever want to take it off and realize that the world sucks? And there will be a few kids that probably do, but I guarantee you, just like with a lot of media these days on the issue of technology, there's no way in hell that they'll say no or say yes to engaging with the real world. Why bother? Yeah, Stonehat's got a very, very good point.
Yeah, why bother doing the hard work to improve your community when you can go into your vague virtual world and do no work at all and just be rewarded with the dopamine hit? So it's very true, a very sad, unfortunate reality. I think this will be the last question, and Mr. Prude has to go soon. So the mystic provides a bridge between your corporal and metaphysical reality and contrasts the sorcerer cast illusions to tear you away from reality. Transhumanism is a form of sorcery. Well, I do agree with that, honestly. Transhumanism is fundamentally anti-human and anti-Christianity, of course. That goes without saying, as it views man as just an object that you can, I don't know, do whatever you want with. It's not sacred in any way. That gets rid of any form of sacred as the meaning or anything, just to improve some artificial thing.
Well, there's a lot I think that I would agree with it in terms of mysticism, especially when you're talking about the paradigm of how the West is now. I do think that it is some kind of materialistic secularism. I mean, the problem is that the West, especially when we're talking about the mystic or we talk about faith or sorcery or any aspect of Christian or Indo-European early religious traditions, is that through our technology, right, through this idea of utilitarianism, we have engaged in, I think, probably one of the worst aspects of it, where we use technology to tear ourselves away from reality in this effort to save ourselves. So it turns into this like techno. There's a really good essay that talks about this by Henry Hopwood Phillips. He calls it Homo Byzantines, but he says that the thing that comes out of this is like techno messianic futurism, which is basically transhumanism, man without death, which is I think a fitting end that many deserve, he says, but it's necessary. And I think that our mission for the West, as we start taking a look at these technologies that drive us away from our society, that drive us away from what makes us human, is that we must, and this is where I agree with him, especially since I lean more towards the Eastern churches and their teachings. He writes this, and I'll finish off here. The mission that follows from this is simple. We must remain equipped to reunite the two natures of what it means to be on Earth. That is the created, human, They're connected to the divine, eternal, just as Christ of Theandros, God-man, united them. Man has been the enabler to enter God's workshop and labor with him in the melding of our reality with his into a greater one. This, in the words of the great A. Scheeman, is the salt of the faith, its contents that is rehearsed in liturgy and the sacraments. It is the same prayer, the joy of thy kingdom come. And I think that that's fitting here, because if we're going to be torn away from reality in this effort to create something that is not of this earth and that is not of something that we would consider mystic or the divine creation, we have only set ourselves up for horrors that, of course, are indeed beyond our comprehension.
Definitely, I very much agree with that. Well, thank you for joining me, Mr. Prudentialist. We had a great conversation. I very much enjoyed it. I thought it was very interesting. Do you have anything you'd like to show before we go?
Well, as always, it's Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. You can head on over to my channel, and we'll be talking about the school of international relations thought that is called constructivism. And if you came over here from my channel and subscribers, Mr. Populist does a lot of fun, interesting work, and he's one of the young guys that has a good head on his shoulders. So go ahead and give a subscribe to him as well.
Thank you for that shout out. I'm glad I took Mr. Benchwist away from talking about pipes all day and Ukraine for the 6 billionth time. I think we were all, that's to talk about the metaverse and these metaphysical subjects. But with that saying, I hope you all enjoyed the stream and have a good day and good evening.